Hey, good morning, America. Hey, what's up, neighbors? I'm going to link a video below in the description that just is so good at presenting a picture of time and place in Europe where science was being fully developed. This is the time when we were just figuring out what elements were. There's no nuclear going on. We don't understand. We're looking for elements, just hard elements, the dirt, the rock, the sand, the soil, the air, whatever we can separate into these new things we call elements. It's 1869. The Americas is building industry. The suffragettes are out marching in the streets. Heavy industry is beginning to roar. It took at least 6 or 7 weeks to cross the Atlantic. There were no planes. This was sailing ships time. Um, so these people in Europe, and it is a clique, it is a small set of people, but they're writing what they do down. They're documenting what they do, and that's why we can make these historical records of our past history from well-written, right? Not one book. There's no one book involved in this thing. So around 1869 is when this video starts. And what I was looking for really is more spectroscopy stuff, right? If you burn something, the light it gives off tells you what it is. And this is the time they were discovering this spectroscopy thing, this elemental search for minerals, for elements. They discovered oxygen, which was huge because oxygen is a very strong catalyst. It's an oxidizer, right? So, and we breathe it. We have to have it. We have to have that pure oxygen, that O2 mixed in with the CO2 that everybody's talking about, the methanes. That O2 pretty much only comes from organic life releasing oxygen along with the CO2. There is a ratio of oxygen to CO2 that plants release. Is that important? Fuck yes. So take a moment. It's a little bit of a long video, and it's one in a huge series. It's funded by the National Science Foundation. I was almost expecting to see this done in a foreign language, but it's really well done. It is worth listening through. There's intrigue, there's sex, there is death and knowledge. It kind of is just an amazing time. Maybe that's where I'd like to have been back in if you ever had those choices, you know. So a part of it, in the very first part of the video, a few minutes in, they do go through spectroscopy quickly. But there's other sciences involved. There's the chemistry part of this. It goes through a lot of what Madame Curie discovered. And you can tell in the conversations they're beginning to learn and question. At this time, the reason I went here is Mendeleev. Okay, Mendeleev wrote the periodic table. And I have a challenge with the periodic table in that it's not enough because it doesn't show isotopes. There are other tables, other displays that show isotopes, but they look nothing like the periodic table. Inside of that, this video, if you watch all these electrical instruments that they're using, the invention of the battery, having batteries, was a huge deal. And those were invented long, long time ago, back in ancient Middle East. Who else had batteries? Asia had batteries. Chinese dynasties had batteries as well. We could argue where the battery technology came from. It's debatable if it came from China and came across the Great Silk Roads into the Middle East and they stole it and took credit for it. Middle East seems to be the best place to plagiarize prior civilizations to help consume and digest them. So back into 1869, away from the pyramids, these scientists are researching fundamental elements. They are discovering the properties of the elements, how they work together. They're also discovering radioactivity. isotopes. Those are the other elements in between the elements on the periodic table. Those get funky and weird, and we make nuclear power out of them. Madame Curie died because of it. Now, she was going after, she was distilling pitchblende, and her end goal was radium, but she didn't realize that radium is a byproduct of something else going on in the local environment, other radioactivity, but they were on their way. So the instruments that you see, those electrical instruments, some of those instruments are tools that I used to certify other tools. They are still some of the most accurate measurement techniques on the planet, and that is a whole nother video on just those instruments themselves. So if you like science, if you want to understand the roots of science, this is the science, the knowledge, the understanding back in the 1860s and before that. This is not new. This is on the shoulders of giants, and you can get an idea of the conversations, the amount of travel and interactions that these people had as part of their careers. Some of them were teachers, some of them were just rich bastards. You have to have money and the time to do these things. You don't get tons of pitchblende from somewhere in Africa to distill out the chemicals to distill tons of pitchblende out. This is the days of sailing ships, remember? That pitchblende took a while to dig out of the ground. Who knows how many people died. And the radium that we got from it, we used to paint watch hands. And the ladies painting the watch hands began dying, began getting sick. This is a long, slow story of how we learned about how these things work. You'll hear a conversation about transmutation inside of this 1869s. Now, transmutation's pretty much a Disney event now, but that was the terminology they had to describe what they saw happening. They knew something was changing. If you listen to Madame Curie's thread in here, and the study of what ended up being cesium, helped fill in the periodic table. And yet, again, in between the conversation, you can hear they're struggling where isotopes fit in, where the radioactive substances fit in. What are these radioactive substances? What they did discover, they did not know about the nucleus, and they just thought that these were different particles that were absolute particles. So a carbon was a carbon, an oxygen was an oxygen. They did not really know about carbon-12 and carbon-14. One's permanent, one decays. Carbon-14 we use is one form of isotopic identification and ratio analysis to date physical objects in the universe, old Earth objects. So look, what they're doing is presented so simply, but they're doing digestions. They're doing exact digestions. They know that they mixed so much of this with so much, how much they cut when they had to dip something in acid to digest it. They knew the weights and the masses and the volumes and kept track of all of that, because as you kind of see, they're doing mass measurements. They're using very exacting measurement scale techniques to try to figure out how much something weighs. You'll notice the complexity of the scale and the chambers. They had vacuums back then. They knew what a vacuum was. They knew what gravity was, and the world was round. So, if you can, take a listen. This is when I wish I had good software instead of just a cell phone. To sit and stop and step through the relationship between everything they're touching in 1869 to where we are today is. On a side note to this, though, plagiarism, theft, and corporate ties, you can also hear that thread through there. So I just spent 10 minutes talking about a 30-minute video. I hope y'all enjoy. My statistics are interesting. The average listen is about 3 minutes here, so those that are, thank you very much. Those on the way by, thank you. Somewhere at almost 400 videos in 5 months of doing this, and 86 viewers now. I gained a few, so welcome new viewers. And to those that left, peace out. Find your place.